I have had my van for just over 2 years now, and it has been a wild ride ever since. I would say I worked on this project pretty slowly, kind of as my time and my budget allowed, so I thought it would be fun to go from the very beginning and talk about everything that I've done to the van. So basically we're going to squish together all of these videos into one. So I was pretty set on a Ford Transit Connect from the very beginning because it looked like the perfect size for me and it was in my budget. I was looking up and down Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist until I finally stumbled across these pictures of what would end up being my van today. Like, look how fun this is. The dealership that I bought it from really didn't have a lot of information on where it came from, so I knew it was super unique, it had a cool story, and it looked like it would be fairly simple to remove the desk and have a blank slate to put my own build on. By the way, I don't know how I haven't mentioned this in any of my videos, but my van's name is Janeway. She is named after my favorite Star Trek captain. Anyway, so Janeway ended up coming home with me, and the first thing that had to go was the ladder rack on top of the van. It was super tall and it was not gonna fit underneath the awning of my apartment, and my dad was like ridiculously worried that I was going to forget I had it up there and just like drive straight into the awning. So we took that off like the day I bought her. Then the next part that had to come off was obviously the desk and the chair and the big filing cabinet thing. All of that was one piece and it had to go because it was driving me absolutely crazy. It rattled so much when I was driving. So one weekend I came home, I don't even know where my dad was, but I was just done with it. So I ripped the whole thing out by myself. It was pretty difficult to get out by myself just because the actual desk was all connected and it was made of like steel. It was super heavy. But anyway, I got it out and I almost had a blank slate to work with. Then I took a break from working on the van for a bit just because of my situation. I was living in northern Michigan at the time in a small apartment. I didn't have any tools and it was freezing, so I didn't really want to work on it. Once it started warming up though, it was time to work on the electricity.
That's it.
Oh God. And interestingly enough, my van actually came with a deep cycle marine battery in it, and it was attached to the battery in the front of the van, and then it was also attached to the filing cabinet desk situation. And at first that was a really good selling point for me because I thought that I would be able to salvage that, and I was one step closer to having everything I needed to have electricity in the van. But then I made the somewhat controversial in the comments decision to remove it altogether. And the main reason for this is that it seemed really excessive to have this battery in here that's like pretty large just so I could charge my phone every once in a while. Instead, I ended up just buying an external battery that charges everything that I need even now. And now at this point, we finally have a blank slate to work on. It is just an empty van at this point, and that is when I asked my friend Eric to help me build the bed platform in the van. At the time, I was a farm manager, and then Eric was actually my coworker. He was one of the maintenance people at the farm, and so we became really close friends, and I told him all about the van, and he was willing to help me with it. And I never knew that I was going to be using the van in the way that I use it now. So looking back, I probably would have designed it a little bit differently. There are 100% better ways to use space and to make this more of a full-time living thing. The main thing that I really wanted was kind of this. So basically, I wanted to be able to open the back doors and just like hang out in my bed and read a book and look at the sunset or whatever. So I wanted that like vibey van, not necessarily like a super space efficient tiny home on wheels. Eric and I built this bed platform with storage in one afternoon with $100 in plywood and screws, 2x4s. And then we used this old dresser that I had from my childhood bedroom to use for the drawers. And so now I had a little bit of storage underneath the bed, but I could also turn it into a full-size twin bed when I needed to. And originally Eric had built me out these triangle pieces that could support the board when you flipped it over. But those ended up being a little bit too clunky for me, so I decided to make this countertop. And so this can actually move and be put on the floor so that it can support the platform that way. I went home for a weekend and I built that out with my dad, and we figured out a way to anchor it to the platform when I'm driving. So if I ever got in an accident, it would be potentially not as dangerous. I built the countertop to work with the dimensions of an IKEA mattress that I ended up purchasing, and it is an extendable kids mattress where it has the bulk of it that I'm sitting on now, but then it comes with 2 of these cushions that you add as your kid gets bigger, taller. So I'll use one in here just as like a back cushion, and then when I want to make it into a bed, I extend it out. And then with this version of the van, I drove thousands of miles across the country with it. I went to Arizona to meet up with a friend. I went to Joshua Tree. I went to Death Valley. Then I drove all the way up the coast, up to Oregon. And then on the way back, I went to Canyonlands, Arches, the Badlands. I did it all, and I came home with a lot of notes on what I wanted to change and improve in the van. The first thing I noticed is that I did not need that big of a bed all the time. If it was just me sleeping in there, I wanted a much smaller bed with more floor space, and so what I ended up doing was cutting that big piece of plywood into 2 sections so that I could pick if I wanted the whole bed out or just the single. Getting out my bed in general was just pretty clunky, so having 2 different boards helped a lot, and then I also ended up taking about a foot off of the end of the plywood board so that I could just get it out a lot more easily. I also realized that having the second cushion was really nice, but it wasn't super necessary. So if I was just by myself, I just had the one, and if I was with a friend, we could just kind of let our toesies dangle, and it just saved me a lot of space by not having to take 2 of these. Another thing I learned was that my van is not for winter locations because of the lack of insulation. I think I really underestimated how cold it would be in some of those areas, and I was fine. I had like a winter sleeping bag and like a hot water bottle and all of that stuff. But yeah, if I ever want to do more winter explorations, I'm gonna have to insulate. But the main thing that I learned on the maiden voyage of Janeway is that I loved van life, and that it was definitely time to invest more money into the van now that I knew that I actually liked it and wanted to continue doing this. I really wanted to add a deck, and that's exactly what I did when I got home. So I recruited my dad to help me with this one. We put it together in like a weekend, and this is definitely my favorite part about my build. I absolutely love my deck. I use it for everything. Picnics, stargazing, playing cards, journaling, just basking in the sun. Like, the deck is amazing, and if you have a van, I highly recommend putting one up there because it's just so fun. The deck was great to add, but I also needed to get a little bit more serious about my kitchen setup because during the maiden voyage, I kind of just used my backpacking stove on the ground, and it worked, but it wasn't super sustainable to be using like all the time. So my big goal before my second road trip was to definitely figure out how I was going to cook like some real meals in the van. And the first thing I did to kind of make that a reality was to add my back door tables. I once again wanted to repurpose my old dresser, and I wanted the woods to match as well. So I used the side pieces of the dressers, cut them out to the perfect shape, and then I used hinges and dowels to make just super inexpensive tables. And yeah, I love them. They're great. I also upgraded my backpacking stove to a 2-burner stove. I normally keep that stored underneath my bed when it's not in use, and then when I am using it, I just push back my mattress and use that as the stovetop. But the real game changer for my kitchen setup was getting a portable fridge from Set Power. Full transparency, they gave me this as a gift, but it has really leveled up all of my meals in the van. Before, I was stuck doing a lot of canned food, a lot of shelf-stable box items, which is great, but it gets a little tiresome after a while. So now that I have a real fridge, I can cook whatever I want, and I'll know that it's gonna stay fresh in the fridge. This green one is the perfect size for my build because, as you know, space is very limited, and so I love that it can hold food for a couple days, but it doesn't take up a lot of space back here. And I am actually super excited to announce, but Set Power is actually gonna give away one of these super cute green fridges to one of you guys. It is a super easy giveaway to enter, but it is over on Instagram, so I will leave the rules and how you enter in the description below. But anyway, let's get back to the video. So at this point, I've kind of fixed the clunky bed situation. I added my super sweet deck. My outdoor kitchen is finally feeling like one. And the van is already more than I ever thought it would be. So I ended up going on another massive road trip, this time to Yosemite. I've made other videos about this before, but I worked there for like 4 months in the national park. And then I eventually returned home, and I took the long way, of course. So I went back to Joshua Tree. I went to the coast. I did Channel Islands, I did White Sands, Carlsbad, Guadalupe Mountains, all that good stuff. And of course, when I got back home, I again had more notes on what I wanted to change and improve with the van. This trip was especially messy and packed with a bunch of stuff. And the main reason for that is because I had things that I wanted to bring to Yosemite while I was there, mainly my bike, which was super annoying. And then I just had more clothes. I had to bring things for the tent, like extra bedding. I had more camera equipment. So it was just a lot more packed than the previous trip. And so that is something that I want to work on in the future. I want to figure out a bike rack that will work for me, one that's not going to interfere with the back doors. And I also don't want to mount it to the top because I don't want to ruin my deck. And I think it would also be cool to extend the overhead storage compartment out so I have a little bit more space for like clothes. But I also really like having the tall ceiling and being able to like party while I'm driving. So I don't know about that either. And then lastly, I think it might be cool to get one of those like flexible bags up on the top of the van. So kind of like a roof storage situation so that I could put more stuff in there if I needed to haul more things. But overall, I'm hoping that I won't have to ever be on a trip where I need that much stuff again. As always, if you have any suggestions on what I should do to the van next, go ahead and leave them in the comments. And seriously, come up with a good idea for the bike rack because that one has me stumped. But anyway, it's been super fun to kind of see how the van has evolved over the last 2 years, all the cool places that it's taking me, and how my experiences have shaped what I wanted to work on within it. If you want any more information on each of the projects, I have a video for pretty much each one, so feel free to check those out, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!